welcome back to Coding from Null. This is week 5. We're building our very own React-based coming soon page. This week we're going to start digging into that subscribe feature where we want the person visiting our site the ability to sign up for our newsletter. So this week we'll be covering kind of the front end part, and then next week we'll be setting up our own server and covering the back end side. So quite a bit to cover, so let's jump right in.
All right, so this is how our application looked at the end of last week, and today we're going to be making this nice little responsive form input and button control. So let's start digging into this. The first thing that we need to do, as always, is create a new component, and that is going to be called subscribe.js. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and create that new style sheet as well. Subscribe.css. Come into subscribe, make a little component here, and let's go ahead and take this div out because this is just going to be a form. So I'll set up a little form, and we'll give this a class name of subscribe. And we need two things in this form. First thing that we need is an input, and second thing that we need is a button. Okay. Let's go ahead and give this a class name of subscribe-email, and give it a name is email, and we want to set a type on this just to give us some little bit of front-end validation, make sure it's an email that's being put in there, and that's all we need for now. And for the button, we'll go ahead and give that a class name of subscribe button. Okay, now the next thing that we want to do is we want to grab a hold of props that are going to end up being passed in here, because we want to have this fully customizable. So we want to be able to pass in both this placeholder and also whatever this is going to say for the button. So here, right before our return, we're going to say const, and we'll do some like this, and button text will be the names that we'll be passing in. We use destructuring here to just take those from this .props. Okay, and so now we can use that. We will say placeholder for the input is going to be equal to that prop that we're passing in, placeholder, and then the text in the button is going to be button text. Okay, give that a save, and while we're in here, so I don't forget, let's go ahead and just import that style sheet. Say styles subscribe.css. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into our parent component, and let's get access to that new subscribe that we just made. Subscribed from /subscribe. In our state, we want to house the data that we're going to be passing in for our subscribe, and that is going to be those two things. It's going to be our placeholder, which is just going to say enter email address. Okay, and then the second one is going to be button text, and for us that's just going to be submit. We'll have that destructured in here as well, and then let's go ahead and plug in that component here and then pass in those props. So placeholder is subscribe dot placeholder, beautiful, and button text is subscribe dot button text. All right, go ahead and give that a save. And now we have this nice little form here. Now the first thing that you'll notice is if we hit submit, we get this page refreshing that happens. That doesn't look good. We want to take care of that right away. So let's come into subscribe. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that this button is specified to submit this form. And how we do that is we say type equals submit. So when this button is clicked, it will submit the form. And then we'll come up here and actually handle the submit by saying on submit of the form, we want to run a function called handle submit that we haven't written yet, but we are going to. So right above our render method, go ahead and give us some space, and we will say handle submit, and we want to grab a hold of the event that will be passed when this function is called, and we will just say e.prevent default. It's just going to prevent the default nature of the form, which is to refresh the page. So if we give that a save and we hit submit now, you see it's not refreshing the page, which is exactly what we want to see. Now we'll be adding some more into this handle submit later, because there's definitely going to be some other functionality that we want to add, but for now that is pretty much it. And so now what we want to do is start with some styling of this. Actually, I think before we get into the styling, we should actually be taking care of the state of the form as well, because we have state that we're passing in here for this placeholder and submit that we're keeping in our parent component, but the form itself needs to keep track of whatever this email address is that our user is going to be entering in. So let's go ahead and take care of that right away. Do state is going to equal email, and we will just set that equal to an empty string or default. And so what we want to do is whenever our user is typing anything in here, we want to capture it right away. And so how we do that is we say on change. So whenever this changes, we want to call another function calling this dot handle change. And just like we handled the submit, we'll come up here, we will handle change. We need access to the event as well for this, which we will handle in just a second. And then we want to set the state, which we do by calling this dot set state. And the email is going to be equal to e.target.value. And that will get the value that whatever is typed in here. What I also like to do here is add just a .trim on the end as well, just in case someone's put some leading spaces in there or something funky like that. Take that out because we don't want that saved for the email. Go ahead and give that a save. We can make sure this is working. We have the React Dev Tools here, and we can pull that up right here. Go into our components. If we go into subscribe, we see our state here, and if we start typing in here, we see our state is automatically updated whenever we start typing, which is exactly what we want. Go ahead and delete that, close that, bring this down. So we are sitting pretty well here. The one other thing that I want to do is I will always want the value of this to match the state as well. So I will come in here and say value equals this dot state dot email. Now it's yelling at me because I have this guy in there. What is going on here? I know what's going on. There we go. Alright, perfect. This is my very good typing skills. So now I think we are pretty well set that we can start styling this. So let's go ahead and go into subscribe. First thing that we want to do is start styling the form itself, which we called subscribe. Go ahead and grab a hold of that. And we want to set the grid area as subscribe. And we will display grid and give this a little bit of grid gap so that the button and the input aren't pressed up right against each other like they are right now. And we'll give that just 10 pixels, should be good. And we'll set some grid template columns. So here I'm going to name, specifically name the grid areas input and button. Now I can do this while I'm setting the size of the columns. Remember, we explicitly called them here in coming soon for our major areas, which was the countdown, logo, title, description. We are on subscribe now. And there's another way to do it, is basically all this is just another way of doing the same thing. And so we'll set the input will be 4 fractional units, and the button will just be whatever is left over, 1FR. And we'll go ahead and align items center. Go ahead and give that a save, and see we have this nice little grid gap here now. We are looking pretty darn good. Now let's go ahead and start styling the email. So we will say .subscribe-email, and the grid area here is going to be input, which matches this input here. I'm just specifying it. We'll go ahead and give this a border radius of 4 pixels. Give it a height of 40 pixels. We will set the background color as that black that we have as the CSS variable that we set. And we'll use that by saying var --black. And set a border, which is going to be 1 pixel, solid, and var --white. And the color of the text is going to be white as well. Now this will set the text of whatever is being typed in, not the placeholder text, which we will handle in just a second. And we will say padding left 10 pixels, because it just doesn't really look too good with the text bumped up right against the edge here. I just want to give that a little bit of padding there, make it look a little better. We'll say outline none. This is just a thing that when we're rounding the border of the inputs and stuff, some of the browsers will have this weird little outline that will be the box shape, and so we just want to make sure that there's no outline on there, just to cover all our bases so it looks good across multiple browsers. We'll go font size 16 pixels, and I think we'll just leave it like that for now. And go ahead and do subscribe email. We want access to that pseudo element of the placeholder to also set the color on that. Then we'll say color var --white as well. And we'll also make sure that we set the font size at 16 pixels. Go ahead and give that a save. And now our input is looking pretty darn good. One thing that we want to do is on hover and focus, we want to change the color. So if we say subscribe dash email and focus and hover, we want to change the border color. And we will change it to that green that we were using, dash green. Go ahead and give that a save. So now when we hover over it, it's switching to that green, but we want to transition it a little slower. So we will just set a transition up here. And we'll just say all 0.2 seconds and ease in. Go ahead and give that a save. And so now it's much smoother of a transition, which is what we're looking for. And now we are ready to style the button. So we'll come down here, say subscribe dash button, and set the grid area as button. We go ahead and give that a save. We should see, oh, that's right. I need to do a little more work here. So first thing that we want to do is set the height of 40 pixels to match the input. We want to set the background color as that nice green that we're using, dash green. We'll set the border. It's going to be 1 pixel solid. This is going to be black. We'll set the same border radius, 4 pixels. We'll do padding, 10 pixels. Font size, 16 pixels. Font weight, give it a little bit of boldness to it. And see if we hover over this right now, it's just the arrow, but we can set that as a pointer. So when it hovers over, it'll actually be the little pointer finger. And we're going to just go ahead and set a transition on this one right away as well. Then take that pointer and transition, and this will be all 0.2 seconds, and we'll ease into this one as well. And so what we want to do is on hover of the button, we'll just change the brightness of it with a CSS filter, which is really cool. So subscribe button, and using a CSS filter, we'll say brightness and 85%. Go ahead and give that a save. So help if we go subscribe button. That usually helps. Okay, so we're looking pretty good here. Now if we hover over it, we are not seeing anything, which is weird. Twitter, subscribe button. Because I'm just saying subscribe button, I'm not specifying the hover. So on hover, so now we see this nice little transition here to a nice little darker hue, which is cool. And now just to cover all our bases for some of the browser's funky stuff, we will say on focus, we want that outline to be none as well. Okay, now we are sitting really well. The only thing is we don't have that responsiveness where it starts to shift the form around as we shrink the size of the window. How we are going to handle that is with a media query. So we will say at media and say max width. So the max width of the screen is 700 pixels. So we're basically just setting a breakpoint that whenever the screen hits max width of 700 pixels, do this. And that is going to be switching around our grid template areas. So for subscribe, we're going to say grid template areas, add inherent, and we will say input and then subscribe, button. And so this one up here, set them side by side. This one will set them one on top of the other. And then we will just say dot subscribe email and dot subscribe button. We will set a width on these so they're both the same of 250 pixels, and make sure that they spread the width of the grid column by saying 1 to -1, which will make it stretch all the way across. And now something funky is going on here. Grid area, grid area. I see. Got a spelling mistake here. So now, there we go. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. So this is our form input now. Next week, we will be handling the back end of this, which will actually be the submission of the email and getting it added to a list on our MailChimp. So we'll be messing around with API keys and setting up a server and all sorts of crazy stuff. So it should be a pretty in-depth one next week, and I'm looking forward to it. Hope you learned a lot in this. We built this nice little responsive, real simple, just form for email submission, but it's pretty cool. And hope to see you all next week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all then.